The boy stood alone at the edge of the Ireland's Got Talent stage, a small and fragile figure beneath the towering lights that seemed far too big for someone like him. He was from Cebu City, a place where mornings began with hunger and nights ended with unanswered prayers. His clothes were worn thin, stitched and re-stitched by a mother who no longer had enough thread to hide their poverty. His feet were bare against the cold, polished floor, toes curling slightly as if searching for the warmth of the dusty streets he knew so well. In his hands, he clutched an old guitar, its wood cracked and faded, the strings rusted but carefully tuned, as if this instrument were the last loyal friend he had in the world. The audience watched in uncertain silence. Some leaned forward with curiosity, others exchanged doubtful glances. They had seen many contestants before, but something about this boy felt different, too real, too vulnerable. The bright spotlight fell on his face, revealing tired eyes that had seen struggle far beyond his years. There was fear in those eyes, but also a quiet determination, the kind that is born when life has given you no other choice but to be brave. His fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of the moment. This stage was not just a stage, it was a doorway between the life he had known and the life he dared to imagine. At the judges' table, reactions were mixed. One judge leaned back, arms crossed, unsure what to expect from a barefoot boy with a broken guitar. Another judge tilted their head slightly, curiosity fighting skepticism. A third judge studied him carefully, sensing that there was a story behind those torn clothes and nervous breaths. None of them knew yet that the silence filling the room was about to be shattered by something unforgettable. The boy took a deep breath, his chest rising slowly as if he were gathering every memory of hardship he had ever lived through. Images flashed through his mind, narrow alleys in Cebu, empty plates, nights spent listening to his parents whisper about debts and dreams that never came true. His grip tightened on the guitar, knuckles turning pale. For a brief second, he closed his eyes, whispering a silent prayer that this moment would not slip away. When he opened his eyes again, the fear was still there, but it was joined by hope. A fragile, glowing hope that refused to be crushed. The stage lights no longer felt like enemies, they felt like witnesses. And as the entire hall held its breath, the poor boy from Cebu stood ready to turn his pain into music, unaware that this first step would be the beginning of a moment that would leave judges shaking and hearts broken wide open. The first note escaped his guitar like a quiet confession, thin and trembling, yet honest. The sound echoed through the vast hall, and in that instant, the air changed. When the boy from Cebu began to sing Hotel California, his voice did not arrive polished or perfect, it arrived wounded. It carried the rough edges of a childhood spent surviving rather than dreaming. Each word felt pulled from deep inside him, shaped by nights of hunger, by mornings when hope was the only thing he owned. The melody wrapped itself around the silence, and the audience leaned in without realizing it, drawn by something raw and painfully real. As he sang, his eyes remained half-closed, as if he were walking through memories too heavy to face directly. His fingers pressed hard against the strings, leaving faint red marks on his skin, but he did not loosen his grip. The pain in his hands was familiar, almost comforting, compared to the pain in his chest. The guitar, old and cracked, seemed to cry along with him, its imperfect sound giving the song a fragile, haunting soul. Every chord carried the dust of Cebu's narrow streets, the echo of laughter he rarely had time for, and the silence of dreams postponed again and again. The judges began to change before anyone noticed. The skeptical posture of one judge slowly softened, arms uncrossing as disbelief gave way to shock. Another judge's eyes widened, then shimmered, the reflection of stage lights mixing with sudden tears. A female judge lifted her hand to her mouth, her breath catching as if the boy's voice had reached inside her and squeezed her heart. They were no longer listening to a song, they were listening to a life unfolding in real time. The audience felt it too. A few people wiped their eyes, embarrassed by tears they hadn't expected. Others sat frozen, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the fragile magic filling the room. The boy's voice grew stronger, not louder, but deeper, as if he were finally allowing himself to be heard. There was pain in it, yes, but also resilience, a quiet refusal to give up. When he reached the most emotional lines, his voice cracked for just a second, and that imperfection made everything more powerful. It was proof that this was not an act, not a performance crafted for applause, but a truth spoken through music. The judges were no longer hiding their emotions. One wiped a tear quickly, hoping the cameras hadn't caught it. Another leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on the boy as if afraid to miss even a single breath. Their faces trembled, not with pity, but with respect. In that moment, the poor boy from Cebu was no longer just a contestant. Through the aching notes of Hotel California, he had turned his suffering into something beautiful, and the room knew it. The song was still going, but something irreversible had already happened. He had touched their hearts, and there was no turning back. The final note lingered in the air, fragile and trembling, as if it were afraid to disappear. The boy's voice faded softly, and his fingers rested on the strings, stiff and aching. For a moment, nothing happened. The entire hall was frozen in silence so deep it felt heavy, pressing against every chest in the room. The boy lowered his head, unsure if the quiet meant failure or something far more overwhelming. His shoulders rose and fell as he struggled to steady his breath, his heart pounding louder than the applause he had imagined but did not yet hear. Then one judge stood up. Slowly, almost as if their legs were shaking beneath them. Their hands came together in a clap that sounded too loud in the stillness. Another judge followed, rising with wet eyes and a hand pressed tightly against their chest. Within seconds, all the judges were on their feet. Tears streamed freely now, no longer hidden or wiped away in secret. One judge shook their head in disbelief, whispering words the microphones barely caught. Another wiped their face again and again, unable to stop the emotion that had taken hold of them. The audience erupted. The silence shattered into thunderous applause that rolled through the hall like a wave. People stood, clapping above their heads, some crying openly, others cheering with voices cracked by emotion. The boy looked up, confusion flooding his face as he saw the judges standing, the crowd rising, the entire room transformed. His eyes widened, then filled with tears that spilled down his cheeks before he could stop them. His grip on the guitar loosened, and his knees trembled as the weight of the moment finally reached him. The lights above shifted to a warm golden glow, bathing the stage in something that felt almost holy. The boy took a shaky step forward, then stopped, overwhelmed. One judge leaned toward the microphone, voice breaking as they tried to speak, only to pause and breathe deeply before continuing. Another judge placed a hand over their heart, eyes locked on the boy with an expression of pure admiration and sorrow mixed together. They were not just praising a performance, they were honoring survival, courage, and truth. Tears continued to fall from the judges' faces as they clapped, their hands trembling, their composure completely gone. The boy finally bowed his head, pressing his forehead lightly against the guitar as if thanking it for carrying his pain. A quiet sob escaped his lips, and he covered his face with one hand, unable to hide his emotions any longer. This stage, once terrifying and cold, now felt warm, alive, and forgiving. In that moment, the poor boy from Cebu understood that something in his life had changed forever. The hunger, the fear, the struggle had not disappeared, but they had been seen. His voice had crossed oceans, broken through doubt, and reached hearts he never imagined touching. As the applause continued and the judges stood shaking with tears, the boy stood in the center of the stage, no longer invisible, his pain transformed into hope, his story rewritten in front of the world.